Okay, my friends, I just had a real nice conversation with a great guy, Raven, who is a Cherokee um, historian, basically. And what he did was he went all around the world. He had a job as a contractor doing, I'm not exactly sure what, but what it was he was able to go and spend time in all of these different places, really exotic places, sounds like. And at the same time, he is a historian, culturalist that wanted to understand the history of the Cherokee stories versus all these other stories because basically does. He's a thinker. He thinks. He uses his mind a little bit. So I he contacted me. He said, I got a lot of stories because I've been everywhere in the world. Basically, is what he told me. So I've been just about everywhere, and they all have basically similar but different sort of stories. Now, which is basically what I found. And Velikovsky's story, which is from the biblical texts, as you will hear, we're going to be talking about this as we go through this. Just it was a Zoom meeting. It was just off the cuff. The first time we've ever talked. And I want to get a feel for, if everything worked out. And it seems to go very nicely. He seems like a nice guy. He's got very good information. He's been here, he's been there, and he seems to be invested in trying to learn this stuff and understand. And I find that's not common. So at any rate, I got up this morning and I see they got this new species that they found, and then they going on about it, that actually had fire, and it was about the size of a chimpanzee, and it apparently has a brain about the size, I don't know, grapefruit. It was a small brain, an egg. I don't know what it was, but it was small, and they just didn't accept the fact that something like that could first of all exist in the place that they found it. Secondly, that it would be able to create and use fire and develop fire, and that's what they're saying. But they don't have any idea really. And they're looking at bones. I'm looking at parts that are actual bodies of the creature. They would break this all apart until they found something that actually sort of looked like a bone inside. These are still stones. Those aren't actually bone anymore, I don't think. Rarely do they actually stay calcium bones. They normally transition, especially if they're in a wet condition. You would think they'd rot away, and a lot of times they do. It just depends. This was all products of a great flood, which was a hot water flood. Show it, and you'll hear about this in the presentation I'm about to do with Raven. So here it comes. It's just off the cuff, winging it. I'm slinging from here to there, and he's talking, and we're both thinking. Here it comes.
Fortunate to be a lot of places, and it was only because I had the right job. If I'd had to do it on my own,
yeah, it's expensive to run around here and there. But anyway, okay, I just wanted to make sure that we understand that you have this sort of a broad knowledge of really intimate contact. Not just reading something that somebody wrote a book about it. That you talked.
I've done that too, but
right. I understand that, but it's different to read a book than it is to talk to a group of people that are indigenous to what you're trying to learn.
So, and today we have it. Today, Roger, we have it made. Like right now, you're like what 700? About 700 miles north of me, and we were able to talk and see each other. People are losing out on a lot of opportunities by not taking advantage of this technology,
I agree. Here, now let me show you the samples of the things that I had tested, the DNA. Now this goes back to 2015.
Mm-hmm.
And I had 3 samples tested. There was a 36-inch tip, which is a fingertip. There was a lung, and then there was a mud tip, which I have on my bench right now. You won't see it, but it's on my bench, and I'll try to show this in a minute. Now, they extracted this is the first test of this kind ever done. And
Nice.
this was DNA to see if they could find DNA that indicated for a fact these were human samples. And anatomically, they're exactly perfect, as you will see. And the DNA tests were all positive for the correct thing and negative for the negative controls, which means it was good. And the DNA was extremely dense and it was extremely excellent quality. Here it is right here. Excellent quality DNA sequence was obtained for the 36-inch tip and the lung sample. And here's what they found was Homo sapien mitochondrial B and D loop regions, which means it's Homo sapien. And I said, does that prove that this is 100%, no question whatsoever, is a human ancestor? And he says, yes, absolutely no question. This is identical, the mitochondrial DNA, to yours and mine. So I can't, you know, this doesn't give you all of the sequences. What he looked for was the maternal sequence that we all apparently have.
Yes.
So
All right.
anyway,
So now, let me reiterate this to folks. You have a fingertip that is 36 inches long.
correct. You're going to see it in a second.
Yeah, and you had DNA sequencing done on this sample that
Correct.
was fossilized, and it came back 100% Homo sapiens.
Absolutely.
Now, I want to emphasize that to folks. We're talking about giants here. Now that Roger has got through that part, we are talking about giants. Y'all wanted to hear about giants? I brought the man in that knows about giants.
Yes, absolutely. I know about giants, and I found them on my. This is all from my property, and you're going to find them everywhere. Everywhere. Well, let me put it this way. This process that creates soft tissues like flesh and faces and I mean everything. This is a fingertip. What you're looking at right here is the fingertip, the 36-inch fingertip. Now follow my cursor. All right, can you see my cursor going around here? This is the fingernail.
There you go.
You see it? That's the fingernail.
Nice.
That whole thing is the fingernail. This little round circle here at the bottom, see this? That's the pad that your fingers bump to the next bone, and it's a little flexible pad so you don't scrub all your bones. These two are the vein and artery. Now look at this. You cannot get DNA from the surface of these rocks. You can't do it, because it's destroyed on the surface. But if you drill down inside, you can get raw, literally raw blood. And I'm not kidding you, blood. Now, this broken piece up here, where you can see my cursor going back and forth, right? All right. So this broken piece up here, what I did was I hit that with a hammer. You know, a pretty good heavy hammer, I don't know, a 3-pounder or something. And it popped right off, and it was a piece of skin. And you want to see what that skin looks like? Here it is. It's a fingerprint.
Wow.
That's the fingerprints.
And that's what you broke off of that top section.
Correct. That's the fingerprint right next to the fingernail. They start to take off and turn into fingerprints. These little spots right here are the sweat pores. You see them up here? This piece popped off just like this. This is what's called keratinized heavy-duty skin. This is what I call it, grip skin. And it's on your fingers and your toes and your palms of your hands and so forth. Anyway, once I took that piece off of there, now you're down into where there's a ton of blood. And when I say a ton, I mean a ton. Inside fingertips are saturated with blood. You see that?
Yep.
That's what's in the fingertips. Now, they have a vein and an artery. The artery comes down with blood, nice fresh blood. The vein, after it's all used up, it goes through what's called these terminals at the tips of the fingers. You see these little spots at the tip? And they turn from the artery, and after the stuff is all used up, it comes back up the vein. These are the terminals of the blood system.
And that's where you drew the sample from.
Exactly. Right out of an artery. Right straight out of an
Nice.
artery. I mean, it was just raw blood, basically. And when I say that, I'm not kidding you. Now, watch this. This is, well, here's another one we had. This is another guy. This head was from right down in, not too far from you, down in Kentucky.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the nose is smashed off. Somebody looked like stepped on his nose or something, and they smashed his head in and all that. This was CAT scan down at University of Texas in Austin.
Mm-hmm.
It was a nightmare. They would not even answer a phone call, and it was the worst CAT scan I've ever seen in my life. So this and that was 8 or 9 years ago, and that started the whole problem. But anyway, that's another story. Now the other thing that I found here that was CAT scanned, was DNA tested, was these one lung.
Yeah, I've seen you show that on your
Right.
I've seen you show that on your YouTube channel.
Right. And this one here is this is pleural. They call this feldspar. Well, feldspar is nothing more than collagen, which is your body's rubbery substance that makes the mats and the fibers and the membranes and all that. There's a ton of it in you. And the collagen attaches to a molecule called aluminum silicates.
Mm-hmm.
And that stabilizes it, and it becomes like a fabric bag that coats these organs. Now, this one here is still intact completely, totally. You know, you see the red blood coming out of down here? This is where I drew the blood out. I drill inside here. It is saturated with blood. I mean saturated. This one here.
Is that the one that you sometimes will get wet so that you can show that it still has the blood?
Yeah, you put catalase on there. Hydrogen peroxide, and it bubbles up like crazy.
Yep.
Yeah. Now this one here had a different condition. This one, the fabric outside eroded away and left all these little holes, which are these alveoli. You see the pink alveoli? Yep. That should be filled with air. Well, they're filled with silicon now, silicon dioxide, quartz. However, some of the blood was still in here, and when it came out of the mud, which mud is nothing more than flesh. Mud is nothing more than eroded flesh. And this thing thought it was still in a body. When it came out of the mud, it leaked all its blood out. Look, see it?
Ooh, there it is, folks.
That's the blood coming out of. I have these things saturated with blood. I just did one. I've been doing a bunch of them about this. They got to start to learn. Here's what happens. Here's what happened today. I got this. Hold on. Remember I told you they found a new species today? They announced it. This is the species. Here's the problem. All they could think about is bones.
Mm-hmm.
Bones are scraps, and they are very, very rare to find bones that were, outside of the flesh, because everything I have is completely saturated with biology.
Mm-hmm.
And the flesh, they're knocking the flesh off of these bones to get down to what they see, something that looks like a bone. Here, I have something here, hold on. All right, here's a bone right here. Now this bone, this hole, is what they call a bone foramen. And there are little divots in the bone, and out of those divots come the vein and artery and sometimes nerves.
Yes.
Now, this one came out of the ground, same thing, came out of the mud and said, holy smokes, somebody just took all my flesh away, I'm going to bleed.
Oh.
And it started bleeding out of this hole. And then it started to scab over, exactly identical to what happens to you. The blood turns into a scab. Underneath the scab is this white fabric. Yeah, I'm sure you've seen on a scab, maybe you haven't looked close, but on the back of a scab is this white fabric.
Yes.
All right, that white fabric is called fibrin. It's a clotting fiber. And when the blood cells get in there, it just seals it off between below and above. Now, black and red is the colors of blood. So we're going to look at the two holes that bled out of here. All right, this is...
Now, Roger, while you're pulling up videos and we're talking, I want folks to understand that when Roger first started this, he went out on his property, and we won't tell that backstory, but now, folks, Roger and I talked last night, so I want y'all to know that too. I want to be straightforward with people, but he went out on his property and he found the first stone. And he's been pursuing this because something told him that he needed to keep pursuing this. And he had something, you can call it divine providence, you can call it whatever you want, but something told him that he needed to go out and look. And that's what got him started. It wasn't that he wanted to go out and just do this. Something gave him an impetus to start doing this. It wasn't just, oh, I'm going to go pick up a rock today. All right? I want folks to understand that about you, Roger, because a lot of people just make assumptions, and we know what assumptions do to people, right?
Yep.
Now, you have found stones. Now, I want to review this real quick. You have actually found stones, taken them out of the ground, and had them seep or weep, depending on what word you want to use. Have you taken samples of that weepage that has come out of these?
Have I taken samples of the stuff that leaks out of them?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but what I do is I take the full body part and then I drill into the artery or vein. Like, see these little holes here, that little hole right there, and this little hole?
Yeah.
And you see the red coming over to the right of that little hole, and if you see this brownish looking stuff in between the hole and the red, and the black one here runs over to this black little, these are really actually the arteries and the veins. They're the little tubes that carry the black, which is the vein blood, and the other one carried the artery blood. Now on the blood samples, are you actually, now you just pointed out that some of this you are getting that is liquid still. Are you also getting some of it that has been mineralized? Yeah, I never really took the red blood. There was no sense to do that. I mean, you could see it's red blood. I was drilling down inside of the body part so that I could show that particular body part, deep inside of it, still had DNA. Well, had DNA, yeah.
And I wanted to clear that up for folks. We want to make sure that people understand what the process is that you've been using.
Yeah, if you want to see here, hold on a second. You can still see me, right?
Yeah.
Here, hold on one second. Let's do this. There'll be commercials that'll come up here and there, but you see what I've been doing lately?
Oh yeah.
I can easily get blood out of rocks. You see this one here? I'm showing that fingertip and the scab. This one shows the volcanoes and Scorpzilla and all those giant dragons and all that stuff.
Well, now, folks, I want you to point out that what he's showing you here are the videos that he's done recently. His channel on YouTube is called Mud Fossil University. And in a day like today where we need as much revelation as we can, excuse me, folks, in a day like today when we need as much revelation as we can, I highly suggest you go back and look at his videos. The stuff that he has, just on the mud fossils alone, will blow your mind. Then he also does light, but we're not going to talk about that today. We might get back on and talk about that on a different podcast.
Yeah, I need to get that out. Trust me, this is the biggest thing that's ever happened, is this light research. And because it changes the entire model of physics. There is no such thing as a big positive nuclear core and then little tiny electrons floating around them. It's ridiculous. It always was ridiculous. It does not work.
Well, I have been working on a whole different thing other than this mud fossils, but we've been working on the protons and Tesla. So you and I are going to have a conversation about that on the next time that we talk.
Yeah, we'll get into that.
I definitely want to do that. But today I wanted to point out your mud fossil research, because a lot of people look at it and they just kind of shrug their shoulders and they don't look around them. I have seen Eagle Rock. It looks like an eagle sitting on a rock. I have seen Turtle Rock. There is no reason whatsoever that anybody would have carved a rock that size to look like a turtle.
Let me show you something. Wait till you see this. I'm going to run this video. Hold on one second. Let me just run it. There'll be a commercial come up, I'm sure.
Do you know what happened?
Well, that's all right. You can mute it and I'll talk. But you and I were talking last night, Roger, and one thing that you and I have both been kind of stumped on is how these things were fossilized so quickly, completely captured with blood still inside of them. I have been trying to wrap my head around that ever since the first time I saw one of your videos. Can you kind of explain to people what usually is the process for fossilization?
The fossilization? Normally, the only way my stuff fossilized that I can determine, and I have created them, is Immanuel Velikovsky said that in 1500 BC, there was an event where the Earth was almost collided with Venus. And it literally was so intense, the energy, that it literally boiled a lot of the water on Earth, on the little lakes and the rivers and all this stuff. People jumped in there to try to save themselves because it was coming like the sun directly at the Earth. And it's the size of the Earth. And this was recorded in every society on Earth. Every culture had exactly the same story, exactly the same date, exactly the same events. Catastrophe. Mm-hmm. And at that point, it was boiling hot water that was all over the Earth and killed all of these gigantic creatures. And I mean, they were gigantic. And I'm going to show you. And at that point, that created what's a process which is called nucleophilic substitution. Now, what that means, let me just explain it in detail. As you are breathing and living right now, your body is dying. Within 5 minutes, your cells will just explode and go bad and start to decay. And the reason is that you are continuously absorbing and giving up products. You have to take in glucose, you have to take in oxygen, you have to give up carbon dioxide, you have to give up all your wastes and feces and urine and salts and acids and bile, and all of those things are in continuous moving of molecules. So what happens? All of a sudden you die. And those molecules now are trying to get rid of the crap that is decaying within inside of them. And enzymes and so forth do that, and they move it through your blood. Well, your blood's not moving anymore. That's why they keep trying to push your heart up and down, so that you can keep your blood moving around to pick up all that crap and get it out of you. And bring in, of course, more oxygen. But mostly it's to take out the crap, because that builds up very, very quickly. And if you don't take it out of there, it'll literally explode your cells. That's what decomposition is. Now, different story in a hot water flood. You have complete creatures that are being literally parboiled. They're being basically cooked into a condition where the fluids within their body are heavily invaded with different chemistry, salts and acids primarily, which do the invasive part of chemistry, which they have a lot of excess electrons or not enough electrons, that type of stuff. Mm-hmm. So at this point, they are seeking stability. Otherwise, they're going to explode and rot, which they would do if they were out on the street.
Yeah, or laying on the beach.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, they're going to rot because they're being exposed and they cannot transfer. That's the key.
Gotcha.
They can't transfer. Now, what happens in an aqueous solution, which means heavily water, and whenever you have a lot of salts and acids, which you're going to have because you got stomachs, we are loaded with salt, and those are highly mobile molecules and atoms.
Yes.
Now,
It's the reason why our nerves. It's the reason why our nerves are able to function the way they do, folks.
yeah,
The salts in our body.
yeah, exactly. They're excess electrons or missing electrons.
Yeah.
That's all it is. One of them is heavy with electrons, and acids are heavy with excess electrons. Salts are depleted of electrons. They're way in the low valence level. I don't know how deep you want to get into this, but
Oh no, we're good. We're good.
All right,
Most people just knowing that there's a positive and a negative charge, and that's the reason why things work in our body the way that they do. I wanted to explain that to him since you were talking about the salts and the acids.
okay, good. So now we understand each other. Now, so here we are in a watery solution for years, maybe. I don't know how long it lasts. It had to be pretty hot for a damn long time. You can't transfer that kind of energy that quickly.
No.
Now, at that point, everything is transferring its chemistry into stability, and that's why you end up with a mud fossil, absolutely flawless. You can see
Gotcha.
Caesar right here, over on the right-hand side. My buddy Caesar, the goose. His feathers are there. Now, you see what I'm pointing at there?
Yep.
This is down, I think, right near you. That's a feather. That's on the next to a street. You see the width of this feather? That's the thickness
Wow.
of the feather. Now I'm going to play this. It only goes for a couple minutes, and I think this is right down the street from you, because I got a buddy, Greg Morrison. He's down. I think he's in Tennessee, or I don't know where he is, somewhere down south somewhere, and he sends me a lot of stuff. And he went up looking for. He's my dragon guy, the East Coast dragon guy.
Gotcha.
And he found this feather on the side of the road. And that sucker is 3 inches thick. All right, and I'll show you in mine. Here, let me play this. I'm going to run in the other room for a minute. This is going to run for about 2 minutes, 3 minutes.
Gotcha.
You ready? Watch this, brother. Here goes.
Okay, my friends, happy Thanksgiving. It's Thanksgiving here in the US of A. And I'm going to show you the biggest turkey that there ever was, as far as I know. This is the feathers, and this is the feather of a turkey alongside of that. And this is one of those feathers. Now, it's a little over 3 inches thick. And when I say thick, I'm talking about from top to bottom. Alright, so there's the top, let's say. And there's the bottom. Alright, and there is the thickness of that feather. Whoops, like this. So we had 3 inches on that. Alright, and we have on this nothing. Nothing at all. Alright, let's do this again. We have nothing at all here that we can detect. Alright, and on this, we have just a small, right about 3 inches. Let's go with 3 inches. So from 0 to 3, that's a lot of multiples. You know, this actually could be 2 thicknesses. I've looked at this carefully, and it's hard to tell whether it's like I don't see this as being a layer. I see this as just being fractured. Because when you look at the side, you don't see layers on this side, and it's just one big piece. And the same thing here, there's no layers here. But I do see something that looks like layers here. Whether they are or not, I don't know. But it's still 3 inches thick. Even if it's half of that, that's pretty thick. All right, here we go. 4 together makes .01. That's 4 of these feathers together. 1, 2, oh, no, 3, I guess. 3 feathers makes .01. All right, so the way I'm calculating it out, this turkey, or whatever it was, this bird, must have been about 900 times bigger than your average turkey. That's a pretty good sized bird.
Shroom with mud water and change your life.
Yep, pretty good sized bird, man.
Don't you just love the commercials? You know, Roger, here's the thing, you know. You and I you said about 1,500 years, but you know, you can go back to 12,900 years ago, roughly. And there are native stories about how the sun got angry and it burned everything. Now, they said it came too close to the earth. It fell to the earth and burned everything. Now, that kind of fits with Velikovsky's description of Venus. And you have to remember, we're talking about native traditional stories. We're not talking about... Now, if you take that pattern and you talk about something, the sun came to the earth and burned it, in South America, they talk about the god got angry and came to the earth and burned it, but they're referring to the sun. Any kind of an event like that would give you substantial enough heat to do exactly what you're talking about. And that's the reason why I wanted to have you on. So many people would dismiss things while all the time embracing something else. I've got friends who embrace the stories from the traditional peoples. You know, the sun has gotten angry 4 times and we're in the 5th world, and it's burnt the earth, but they will not listen to something like this because they won't take the time to listen to the science behind it. That's the reason why I wanted to have you on. Now, my folks have stories about a whole city of giants that lived over on the Tennessee side of the mountains. And now, you're going to laugh again because we talked about this last night, but, you know, these people were somewhere between 12 and 18 feet tall. The men were about 3 times the size of the average Cherokee, and the women were about twice to 3 times the size of the average Cherokee. Now, they called them giants. They called them giants, and you had a good laugh with me yesterday. Can you give people an idea of some of them that you've been able to find? I mean, I know we have the big statue there in Greece, and he's 100 feet.
Well, my big guy, his one little fingertip I showed you was 3 feet long.
Mm-hmm.
All right, which means that and they were anatomically identical to us.
Yes.
That would mean that he would be I figured it calculated out to be about 160 feet tall.
See, folks, now this is what I'm trying to differentiate for you all, because the giants that are in the mounds here in the United States are between 12 and the biggest one I've heard about so far is 24 feet. And what we're talking about is a 36-inch fingertip. That would make this guy, what did you just say, 150?
160 is what I came up with.
So even the giants that we've been talking about wouldn't have come up to this guy's ankle.
Oh, you know about Devil's Tower, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
That's a giant's foot. I know that the native, they say it's Bear Mountain or something, that a bear scratched it out, but it's not. That is a foot, and I can prove that very, very easily. Here's Devil's Tower.
Folks, he has a video up about Devil's Tower that you ought to take a look at.
Oh, I have a lot of them. A lot of them about devils.
The interesting thing to me is we will see people up Devil's Tower. It's a beautiful place too if y'all haven't been there. It's interesting to me that, you know, okay, let's just talk about the Christians. The Christians say, In their own book, it says there were giants on the earth in those days and in the days after. And they're described in various sizes. I mean, if you go by their cubits, they're saying that they're like a half a mile tall.
Can I just interrupt you?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. First of all, the statement is, and Jeopardy last night, I know they've been following my work on Jeopardy. I'm absolutely certain of it because they keep having questions that are sort of leading. And here was the leading question. You just said there were giants on the earth in those days. Here's what it was the question that they asked. They said, in the Bible it says, there were giants and then it was blank, blank, blank in those days. And nobody knew the answer. And you didn't get it right either. Whoa, hold on, you didn't get it right either. You said there were giants on the earth in those days. No. It says there were giants in the earth in those days. They were the earth. They are the earth. And then after that, there were more giants. When the daughters of, or when the sons of God, which were literally planets and moons and gigantic creatures like Typhon and all those things that are thousands of miles long. I don't care what anybody says, they're real. And they came down and they could morph. If you read Ovid and Metamorphosis, he says the first words in his epic story was that these creatures could transform themselves into anything they wanted. Mushrooms or fungus or rivers or butterflies or ants or gods, which were the, really god-looking. They all came down looking like male studs.
Well, and let
down.
me point out too that in Greek mythology, when you talk about the pantheons, you have Zeus who changed himself into whatever he wanted in order to have sex.
Exactly. And Zeus is, I'm going to show you what Zeus is. He's Jupiter, and Jupiter gave birth to Venus because Jupiter also has a vagina. You think I'm kidding? Here it is right here. There's Jupiter's vagina. You ever seen one of those before?
Now that is actually off of Jupiter, right?
Yeah, that's a vagina. That is literally a vagina, and it is about to give birth again. It's coming out.
Velikovsky said that Venus was actually born from Jupiter.
Yeah, well, he reported it because it was recorded from every culture. They said the feared god Jupiter gave birth to the fiery comet Venus. And it took 7 days to approach Earth and almost hit Earth and cause all our catastrophe. And that's our Earth, which is the same size as Venus, in the red spot. And Venus now Jupiter now is about ready to give birth again. There's no question. I just did a video on it. Absolutely no question. It's sloughing off. It's turned round. It's turned almost totally round instead of the vagina shape, and over the top it's sloughing off slabs of red material. They don't know what it is. It's blood.
Well, there's always been the legend and the lore about the planets actually being living entities, which is what I wanted to. The other thing that I wanted to bring us to at some point in time. But let's talk about our legend about the rocks.
All right, here's Devil's Tower. I don't have any legend about this, but I do have one about Hobamuk, who is right down the street from me, is where he lived. I mean, seriously. And he got really upset with the people living here because they weren't giving him enough tribute. And he stamped his foot in the Connecticut River and forced it to change course. It changed course,
Yes.
and I found out where he did stamp his foot. And then the native population, they killed him. They drugged him or something. And he is right down the street from Yale. and I've seen his ribs are actually there. We could look at that in a second. But anyway,
All right.
let me just show you how big these creatures were. This is Devil's Tower, and the top, you see this wrinkly looking stuff? That's tendon. All of these fibers are from tendons. And every time you break a tendon, it's under tension, you get a wrinkle zone at the top. And that's
Nice.
what this is. This red stuff coming down the side is where there was a artery up there that fed a little bit of blood.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's the side look. This, I think, was where the second foot was over here. And the red stuff is where the bloody tissue fell off. You know, his, let's see what we got here. All right, this thing is tall.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just barely to his ankle.
Wow.
Now all of this is his bloody, fleshy body, and that's what this here is all from his bloody, fleshy body as he fell over. And the blood, I mean, flesh. You see it? How green it
Yeah.
is around here.
Yeah.
That's his body. That's where his body fell over. That green grows where there was blood. Blood is, they call it blood meal.
Yeah, we use blood meal in our gardens.
Yeah, absolutely. It grows things green. That's his body. That's one of his feet. Here's, I believe, where the other foot was, right over here. And what happens is one foot will go deep in the ground trying to push the other foot out. And then you don't see one, you see one is up.
Yep.
All right, now
Well, you know, it's interesting because you see these things. You know, you and I had talked about this. I haven't actually seen the island itself, but I've seen photographs that were taken by somebody who was looking at the island. They call the island the Sleeping Lady. The locals do. And if you actually take a photograph of the island, you can actually not only see the shape of her hips and her breasts and you can see her whole body laying there. And I just found it fascinating that the people called it the Sleeping Lady. And when you look at it, if you can't tell that there's physiology there, there's something wrong.
Well,
You know, you and I were talking last night. The story that my great grandmother shared with me when I was a child about the 7 dragons that laid down here and went to sleep in order to protect the people. And those ended up being the mountains that are the 7 rings of mountains around the Cherokee homeland down here.
Well, that's why I'm thinking. That's why I'm thinking that gigantic feather I showed you, that 3-inch thick feather. You know that those dragons had feathers.
Yes,
Right.
just like dinosaurs did.
Yeah. Well, these dragons, you know the size of the feathers, and you know about the East Coast dragon. Did I show you that one?
Well, you and I talked about it last night.
Well, I'll show you in a second. I got Google Earth coming up here. But what I want to show you is there's some idiot on the internet put this baby corn roots on a picture underneath Devil's Tower and claims that it had roots. And you see it's that picture there. You know, there's idiots that try to ruin everybody's research.
I know. It's constant. It's
All right,
constant.
let me show you something. That was Devil's Tower, and that is a foot, no question. But here's where that dragon is on the East Coast. There's his head right there.
Nice.
You see it all the way up right around here?
Folks, you watch the geography here, because there are so many things that if you just look, but you got to look at the macro. You can't look at the micro.
Yeah, you
you
gotta stand back and let your mind think. You know what I'm saying? Oops, I grabbed the wrong
But you know,
one.
for my grandmothers, like I said, my great grandmothers told me that the homeland here, there were 7 dragons. They were immense, and the people needed protected, so they laid down, and they went to sleep, and they turned into the mountains that surround us.
All right. Well, here's the deal. Those would have been little dragons. Those would have been little puppies. This is the big dragon. This is Quetzalcoatl.
Mm-hmm.
Now, over here is the standard picture you see of him in the glyphs that they had, with his big feathered head up here and his snaky body, eating people. He's eating a person.
Mm-hmm.
Here's his beard and all that stuff, which is the same as this one. This is him right here. And he was he's eating people. I don't know whether they liked him or not, but he was eating people. That, to me, I wouldn't like a dragon like that living around me.
No.
But anyway, that's him, and this is the feathers that are. And let me show you right on Google Earth. There's his head, and you see the different color. Just follow the color. The color means he's got a different geology here. There's like the scales of the dragon are different than the red where the blood ran off.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's his beard. The beards are toxic as hell. Now I don't know what the chemistry is coming out of that beard, but the ones I have found are very toxic. The one like in North Africa. And you see these are the two beards. The chemistry, I don't know what it is, but it would be interesting to find out.
Oh yeah.
Because that is in North Africa, that's the source of the toxins that tried to kill the fish.
Oh yeah.
All right, now this dragon, here's his feathers. Remember all the feathers coming out of the head?
Mm-hmm.
Here they are. Here they go. See, same one. These are all feathers. You see them coming up here?
Yeah.
Those are the feathers. Now, coming up his body, the same thing. He was feathered from top to bottom. And when I say top to bottom, here's his head, runs all the way up into Canada. These are the Green Mountains. And they're green because not only
Like the
does
flesh.
well, actually, no. This is a different story. If you look up feather meal, we just talked about blood meal.
Yeah.
If you look up feather meal, it's the same thing. They grind up feathers, and it makes plants grow greener than hell. And the reason
Wow.
is there's a ton of nitrogen in feathers, and the same thing in blood. And the nitrogen feeds the chlorophyll. The chlorophyll is the receiver of the light.
Yeah.
But now follow this. You have to follow the abrupt transitions. Follow my cursor. This is not just accidental that it's running all the way up here. This different color, see it?
Mm-hmm.
It's going all the way up into Canada.
That's one big giant.
That's the whole that's the whole side of the United States. But that's not unusual. Scorpzilla is all the way from California to Russia. And the one in North Africa runs all the way across North Africa. And here's this one.
Mm.
Have you seen these yet? I don't know if you have.
I've seen the one in Africa. I hadn't seen the one going through to Russia.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
show
you.
them, if you would, show them the one there in Africa so they can see it.
Here it is right here. Here's his
Yep.
head. Same thing. Here's his head, runs all the way around his nose, up around his flashy head. His throat runs all the way down here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is all of this is runoff of blood from decaying a body. It's just like it would rot in of a body's rotting off flesh. But the actual body stops here where the dragon scales are. You see them?
Mm-hmm.
Those are all dragon scales. And that protected his throat, which is right here.
Yep.
Now, those are all scales. They're all the same. They run all the way down, all the way down, all the way down until he got gashed in his throat right here with a great and mighty sword. You see that?
Yep.
And that's exactly what it says in the ancient texts. And right there, you see the red the red blood again, the green, right in the middle of the desert. That's
Yep.
because it was saturated with red blood. And there it is, where the red blood is right there. See, running right off into the desert.
Yep, and it's all green right there in the middle of nowhere.
Right in the middle of nowhere. And they also live in the fertility of the feces. And where would that be? If this dragon's head was here, his body runs all the way across North Africa. This is his tail. Way over here. You see the tail?
Mm-hmm.
That's all running off the same thing from a dead, decaying body. And that's the dragon's scales on his tail. So, that means from here all the way back to here is his body. Here's his legs. And guess what his legs are? They look just like thighs of a human. And I'm going to show you something that's going to blow your mind in a second. But this is his body. Runs all the way from here back to here. Everybody's pooper is right about here, right? You'd expect that's where it would be, right?
Yeah.
Well, that's where it is. And that's where they're living, because they live where fertility is. Fertility is where there's fertilizer. Fertilizer is where there's poop. They're living because this is a good source of poop. And there, right there, was his anus.
Wow. You know, it's amazing to me now. Roger, I got to ask you a question. Do you think at one time that these big serpents, because you can find them in different places, do you think that there was a lot more water covering the earth at the time, and that's how they moved around? Or do you
I
think
have
that they were
no idea. That's the killer. No clue whatsoever. All
So,
I
you know,
can
for
say, when you look at this, well, you think about this, and I'm going to show you something that was written about this. This is not unknown. How they got here, I don't know. But I can tell you, Apollodorus wrote exactly about Typhon. This is Typhon. These are his legs. You see his legs right here?
Yep.
They are the thighs of a human. And then from here down, they turn into coils. And the coils got all beat up here, but when they come out over here, this is skin. You must know about skin and leather, right? You know, if you're a native Cherokee.
Yeah, you know what skin looks like?
Right, that's a hide, right? Would you go with a hide?
Yep.
That's
exactly like hide.
It is hide. It is hide. That's the skin of this guy's coils. This is the coils that came down from his legs and turned into giant viper coils. You know, a lot of it's eroded, but they came down from the thighs of a human. Now, he was attacking this giant fish, which is here.
Yeah, it looks like yep.
And that fish was being killed by the toxins. Remember I told you how nasty the toxins from the beard is?
Mm-hmm.
This is the beards from this dragon. All right, so here's his head. Here's his beards coming down, the same place. And they tap into this yellow stuff that runs down his body. You see that yellow running all the way down his body?
Mm-hmm.
That's the source of
That's
venom.
almost like venom.
It is
It
venom.
makes you wonder if it didn't. It makes you wonder if it didn't work kind of like a man of war, where the tentacles or the beard that hung down worked like tentacles.
It could very well be. But look at what came out of these beards. You see what this beard looks like? Now, look at the one that spit the nasty stuff. This is the nasty one.
Ooh. Yeah, see, folks, this is the reason why I wanted to have Roger on. I wanted you all to be able to see this. Because there are things much larger and much grander than the small stories that we've been uncovering.
They won't let you uncover. They cover. They cover and run. Academia is now, it's just terrible, absolutely horrifying.
I know.
Horrifying.
We talk about this on my show all the time, Roger.
It's just, it's a tragedy, absolutely tragedy what they're doing to humanity.
I know.
They are hiding our true humanity from us. Now look at that fish. That dragon spit all over the back of this fish. And it ate right down into his vital flesh. You know what we're looking at right there?
That's rotten flesh.
It is. That is blood vessels feeding every cell.
I have looked at this image that you put up of Typhon for years now. And I have always wondered if it didn't work similar, like I said, similar to like a man of war. Somehow the tendrils that hung down off their face was able to direct that poison, that toxin, or it almost looks like it works like spider venom if you look at the way that fish looks.
Well, what it did, it was it ate off all of the top surface of his tissue, so that we're looking at really the blood vessels. These are the
Yep.
actual blood vessels, and all of remember I said life loves blood. Every one of these little trees is growing on a blood cell.
Yeah,
That's how
it's growing right on that. It's growing right on a venual or an arterial exit.
it's growing on a blood cell.
Yeah.
It's,
Isn't that a trip?
they're literally growing on blood cells. You don't see them
there's
growing
not-
over here.
and-
This-
And there's nothing else around except for right there.
right there. This is the arteries. Every artery brings down blood, and it brings down heavy, and then it branches off, and it runs down to the little tips. And every single tip, even has every single one of them has a plant growing on a blood cell. I mean, this is just astounding stuff, man.
Oh yeah. Well, and then the fascination with me is like, where did these behemoths come from? Because there were obviously people around that continued the stories in order to know that they were here. But it's like, where did they come from? They are the size of continents.
They had to come from space. I can't see any other way. That fish, somebody told me, I didn't do the measurements, I guess the fish is like 600 miles top to bottom or something. There's no way, they can't swim anywhere. The dragon, listen to this though. Here's the killer. Where do you hear this? Apollodorus 1.6 Typhon. All right, here we go. Now, we just saw Typhon in the desert. Do you agree?
Yes.
All right, what is Typhon? Here he is right here. When the gods had overcome the giants, Earth was still more enraged, Earth itself, and had intercourse with Tartarus, which is basically hell, and brought forth Typhon, who is the monster that we just saw.
Yeah.
He was a hybrid between man and beast. Now listen carefully. In size and strength, he surpassed all the offspring of Earth. As far as the thighs go, he was of human shape, his thighs, and of such prodigious bulk that he out-topped all the mountains, and his head often brushed the stars.
Wow.
One of his hands reached out to the west, the other to the east, and from them projected 100 dragons' heads. That I haven't found. But from the thighs downward were the huge coils of vipers, which when drawn out reached to his very head and emitted a loud hissing. His body was all winged and unkempt, his hair streamed on the wind from his head and cheeks, and his fire flashed from his eyes. I didn't show you that, but I will. Such and so great was Typhon when hurling kindled rocks, he made for the very heaven with hissing and shouts, spouting a great jet of fire from his mouth. When the gods saw him rushing at heaven, they made for Egypt in flight, and being pursued, they changed their forms into those of animals. This is the thing. Now listen to this. However, Zeus pelted Typhon at a distance with thunderbolts, and at close quarters struck him down with an adamantine sickle. And as he fled, pursued him closely as Mount. And he goes on and on about how Typhon and him, and then they got blood everywhere. This is Apollodorus is woo-hoo-hoo.
Oh yeah, and the thing about it is, people, it says that Zeus cleft his throat with that. So there's the injury that you see on the dragon in Africa.
Yeah, he
Um,
cut his throat with his great and mighty sword. That was what was written. Now, listen to this now. Then we're talking let's talk about Venus.
Well, you know, it's interesting too that story talks about it, that there was an opening in hell, and that's where that Typhon came from. And you and I were talking about this last night, and I brought up the fact that they showed in the movie Pacific Rim, they show an opening from the abyss, which is the bottom of the ocean, and that's where all these creatures were coming from that were giant.
How big of giants are they talking about?
Well, these were the size of skyscrapers. I mean, these made the 100 and 200 story buildings look like they were miniatures.
Yeah, well, you know something. Here, I'm going to tell you what happened. 1500 BC, as Velikovsky recorded. Hold on one second. Let me find what I'm going to do here.
You know, it's interesting to me too, though, that we have such cross-cultural, and now modern science, some of them that are way on the outside extremes are starting to catch up with it. But you know, it's just really interesting to me that we have these cross-cultural stories that all line up, and people would rather believe, I love that lie in the middle of it, than actually the evidence of their own eyes, you know?
Yeah, they don't care about the truth. They just care about what if it was peer-reviewed.
Well, that's how they make money, you know?
Well, that's it. And I'm telling you right now, and that's it is a fact. And I don't blame them. They got to make a living. But if we could get this in the open, out in the open, we could discuss it. And then they'll have no option. That's what I've been doing. Because there's only one way to get this out.
Yeah, well, that's the reason why I've got you on, Roger. And I'm hoping that you and I will be able to do a couple of these.
Oh, yeah. I need to do this, Raven. I need to get people to pay attention to the reality. I'm you know, you can only live so long. But here's the deal. This is what literally did happen when Venus was born from Jupiter. This is exactly what happened. Obviously, this is an artist's rendition, but let me show you what is not an artist's rendition and is happening right now. And that is this.
You know, that's an artist's rendition based on Velikovsky.
Well, it's based on, well, yeah, based on what every culture on Earth recorded. Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Now, and so here's what it is, and here's what it looks like if it was going to happen again, and here's what it looks like, because it is going to happen again very soon. Here's what Jupiter's red spot is. It's a vagina. Not only is it a vagina, it is literally, it even has the hairs. These are the hairs around the edge of the vagina. All right, there's the clitoris, there's the urethra, there's the vaginal canal, all the ripples, all the whole 9 yards. And this little tag right here at the bottom, you see that?
Yep.
That is what is also in a vagina.
Mm-hmm. Folks, if you can't see that, I can't help you.
I know. I'm pretty good with vaginas, you know.
Well, you know, the thing about it is, Roger, it's like as above, so below. People will say that all the time, and they're referring to a lot of different things. But then when you show them something as above that looks like so below, they completely ignore you. Yeah, absolutely. You know?
All right, watch this, watch. You see this one?
Uh-huh.
See that tag at the bottom?
Yep.
You see all these little hairs around the edge? All right,
Yep.
You see the clitoris all around the top? You see the urethra right there? Vaginal canal. They found this is 1,500 miles deep. They had no idea. Now watch this. This is all new research. Now, here's what a vagina looks like. there's that little tab that locks it in.
Yep.
All of the same things. These are the hairs around the clitoris. The whole. It's
Yeah.
exactly identical. There is no difference whatsoever. Now, that gave birth. Now, right now, if you look up what's happening with the great red spot, it will say it's changing rapidly, and they don't know why. Now, Mariner 7. Shoemaker Levy 9. Here, let me show you something. All right, here it is right here. Great red spot changes. The great red spot is changing right here. It's turning round because it's about ready to give birth. Plus, it's shedding off red slabs of what they don't know is blood. Look at here, right here. See, flaking at its edges.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this. The great red spot, persistent high pressure region. And the reason it's high pressure is because it's a mound. It's called the Venus mound. It's a vagina. The Venus mound.
That's something else people don't realize either, is that the red spot is called the Venus mound.
Exactly. And
I wonder why they would have named it that.
yeah. Well, the Venus mound is what is called the mons pubis, which is the upper fleshy part of the vagina. It sits on the top of the vagina, and that's what is making the wind swirl. It's not swirling because it's a storm. The winds are high pressure because they're pushing against the mound. So it's a great red spot. It's a persistent push of high pressure against a mound in the atmosphere of Jupiter, producing an anticyclonic storm because it has to swirl around it just like it would by any other little round thing.
Yeah,
It's the
like
largest.
Eddie in the river.
Right. So then it says where it's located, and high winds go around it, and so forth. Now, they say that it existed. They don't know when it existed since. It's been there forever, so they had no clue about it. But what happens is, you can see, the winds sweep around here. They're not part of this. The wind's coming by because the planet is spinning. It's spinning. And the winds have to get around this mound. Now, here they are right here. Now, look at what it's doing right now. Remember I showed you what it was before? This is 2018.
Wow.
Now, Shoemaker Levy impacted Jupiter in 1994. There was 9 big impactors, but there was thousands of little pieces of sperm that impacted all around Venus, all around the red spot. And I believe it impregnated Venus again, Jupiter again, and here it is. Now today.
Folks, before we go any further, let me, okay, he called it sperm and impregnation, all right? Even if you don't want to buy into that, it added cosmic material in mass to the atmosphere and the substance that is Jupiter. Well, when you add that kind of mass, something has to give way. And if you go back to the old stories about Venus being born from Jupiter, it says that something came upon Jupiter and Venus was the result. So we're taking my mythology and research, and we're bringing it into observations by Roger. All right?
Hold on, keep talking. I'm going to grab a cup of tea. Keep talking. Hey,
I got my coffee, Roger.
All right,
what I'm trying to point out to you is that just because you're using different terminology, just because you don't see it quite the same way. Okay, it was a comet that shot in and hit Jupiter. All right, it added material to Jupiter, and in doing so, it created a material that could be used. And if you go back to the old legends and the old lore, it's not just Velikovsky, okay? You will hear this from a lot of different places. Jupiter gave birth to Venus. It's in the mythology, it's in the lore. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to give you a view outside of old mythology, okay?
Raven, let me jump in here. I'm going to show you something right now. Here's what's going on right now. You see the red spot.
Yes.
Its central core, which is where the cervix is starting to push out, and it's starting to release blood. What you're looking at right there is blood. You see it running out of there?
You see the trailings, yeah.
It's giving blood off. It hasn't ever done that before. And it's slabbing off slabs of red blood right now. They don't realize this, but that's what it's doing. And they claim they know it's doing it, but they don't realize why. This is what it should have looked like, and that's what it's looked like for a very long time. This is all brand new in the last 10 years, and this is what it looks like now. And here's the blood. There's the blood literally leaking out. You see it?
Yep.
Now, I'm going to tell you what happened 1,500 years ago. All of the plagues of Egypt were caused by another literal live birth. And when I say literal live birth, I'm not talking a fake live birth. I'm talking about something that is a body that had an umbilical cord and a placenta. And here's what's happening. Right now, that thing is about ready to give birth. When it does, what comes out is a planet, followed by an umbilical cord, followed by a placenta. And obviously all the red blood comes with it. Now, it headed towards Earth and almost impacted with Earth. And at the same time, Velikovsky recorded that not only did it hit so hard that it made the Earth combust almost. And in places it did combust. Huge fires. And of course it rained boiling water because of the impact and crushing the compression of oxygen and hydrogen, which is normally the gases that are in the atmosphere, O's and H's, which are not combined. If you crush them together, they turn into H2s and O's, H2O, which is heated boiling water.
Yes.
Now, at this, what is going to happen to Earth if this literal body of a creature passing through space and almost impacting with Earth? Here's exactly what did happen. Earth burst into all kinds of catastrophe. The oceans overflowed, boiling the waters. Then what happened? Stones fell from Earth. Thousands and millions of stones, and slew all of the people on the battlefields. That was recorded.
Oh yeah.
That is the stony material of an umbilical cord. It's made out of extremely tough, strappy, fibrous stuff, which is stony and would break into rocks and would come out of the sky. A huge, long umbilical cord. Now, what happened next? The red blood fell all over Earth. The oceans turned red. The Earth was covered with blood.
The sky rained red. The sky rained red for days.
Everywhere.
Some stories that say the sky rained red for years.
Yeah, well, it's the blood. And Velikovsky said hydrocarbons fell all over the Earth. That's what blood is. And when you heat blood up, you end up with different hydrocarbon densities. You end up with light oils and gases, and then you end up with heavy crude oils and so forth. Depends on what temperature it got to be.
Oh yeah.
So all of that.
You know, Doctor, there's an old text that came out, and I'll have to find the link to it. But there's an old text that came out that talks about the Battle of the Giants, and we're talking about the giants. We're not talking about 12 or 16 feet. But there's an old tome that comes out and it identifies the kings and the leaders of the giants. And they had a great war there in Africa. And it talks about during the war, the sky turned red and things were falling. It's actually in that book. I'm gonna have to get you a link to it.
Yeah,
So
give me a link for that. Yeah, I'd like to see it. But if you want to read Apollodorus, you start with Apollodorus 1.1. It starts out with how everything happened. But let me just finish up with this. Let me finish up with this.
Go ahead.
So I don't miss this last point I was going to make. The last thing that happened was the Jews in the desert ate manna. Well, what is manna?
Flesh from heaven.
Yeah, well, where'd that come from? That's the placenta. That's what the baby would be eating in the womb. A placenta, which is nothing more than dried milk. Or wet milk in the body. Dried milk when it fell from heaven. That's what they were eating, cookies of placenta.
Yep.
All of that stuff falls right into place. If you take it as a live birth.
Oh yeah, and it got cooked as it came through the atmosphere and space.
If you take it as a live birth, which you have to.
Well, folks, Roger and I are going to do another one of these, but he and I have committed a lot of time this morning already. And Roger, I really do. I'm running out short of time, but please finish this thing on. See, here's the thing. If people actually read Herodotus and these old historians, they would understand what you and I are talking about. But unlike you and I, who actually read, a lot of people just say, oh, that's gobbledygook, and I've never heard that before. I have an advantage of coming from tribal lore and having met a lot of tribal people from around the planet. And then when I started reading Herodotus and all these old ancient historians, I'm like, now, wait a second. That fits with our mythology. Now, why is that? So I started putting pieces and parts together. That's the reason why I wanted to get you on. And Roger, if you will, I definitely want you to come back on with me, and we'll go even deeper into some of these mud fossils and some of the other things that you found. And I really want to do one whole show of nothing but your light work, the stuff on light.
I'm down with all that. I'm down with all that, my friend, and I appreciate the opportunity to show other people that have never been exposed to my stuff, because I'm in a box now. They don't like me. They're never gonna like me.
Well, I feel the same way.
Well, here's the problem. Just like I told you before, I came to the realization. I thought, as I was telling you before, like you said, this is the first time you ever saw my face, and it's really the first time I've ever shown my face. Hardly, maybe once or twice before, but it wasn't supposed to be anything about me. I presented all this stuff. I'm expecting somebody's going to look into it. Never happened. 12 years.
I know.
And nothing but disrespect and venom. Not a question. I've never had one single question from academia. Not even a question. Where did you find this? How did this happen? What is this all about? What is it? Not a word. Nope. Read chapter 26.
You would think somebody would ask, well, why is there Homo sapien DNA in a 36-inch fingertip?
Oh no! It doesn't exist. No. You don't understand. You don't understand. You got to read chapter 26 and then get peer reviewed and then get published in an article and then have everybody tell you you're an idiot and then you lose your job. You know what happened to Velikovsky? When they took his book off the bookshelf, nobody would allow him to put his publish out. Listen to this all the way from the beginning to the end, because this is important. Nobody would let him put his book out. So he went to a publisher, and the top textbook publisher, because he was a scholar, he was a friend of Einstein's, and they would not let him publish, and this is the stuff he was publishing about. So he goes to Macmillan, and they said, well, we can't publish it because nobody likes you, and nobody likes what you're saying. And then the museum director, I think it was the National Museum or something like that of New York City, said, we will do a expose on what he's presenting, and then we'll let the people make their decision, and I will let it be done at my museum. So Macmillan said, oh, okay, that's good. We'll publish the book, and then you do the expose, and then they'll be able to make a determination. Well, they published a book. Academia went insane and said, if you don't take the book back and stop publishing that book, even though it was on the bestseller list, top, for 11 weeks in a row, they said, if you don't take it off the bookshelves, we'll never buy another book from you. Now, the guy that was going to do the thing at the museum, he gets fired. They just walk in and they say, you're fired. And he said, why? They said, we don't like you anymore, get out. That's it. That's how they stop these things. But anyway.
That's how academia works.
Yep. All right. Well, we're going to run this. I'm going to close my end up, and let's just talk for one more minute. But I'm going to close my end up. You can keep recording whatever you want to do. All right.
I'll stop the recording.
All right. I'm going to stop recording too. All right. This was a pleasure, though.